First-time unemployment claims fell to their lowest point since the start of the pandemic for a second consecutive week. According to the U.S. Labor Department, 547,000 Americans filed new jobless claims for the week ending April 17th. That is down 39,000 from the previous week. It's the lowest number of initial claims since March of 2020. Analysts expect these numbers to improve ahead of the summer as more Americans are vaccinated and states continue to loosen coronavirus restrictions. Joining me now for more on this week's unemployment numbers is Lori Bettinger. She is the co-president of BancAlliance. Lori is also the former director of the Troubled Asset Relief Program during the Obama administration. Hi, Lori. Welcome. Great to see you again. So this is good news. This is the lowest number of first-time unemployment claims submitted since the start of the pandemic. What does this mean for the nation's economic recovery?
Thanks, Tanya. I agree. This is good news. It's really nice to see the numbers consistently start to trend in the right direction, and I hope that this really bodes well for our recovery. That said, I would be remiss if I didn't take 1 second to say these numbers still are elevated. And, even at, just over 500,000 new claims, that's still really twice the level that we were seeing, before the start of the pandemic. So it would be hard to say that we're there. We've seen a recovery. I think that we still have over 8 million fewer jobs than we did at the start of the pandemic. But we are starting to see some of these numbers move in the right direction. And to me, I think we're starting to see the results of business owners and people in places that they're making hiring decisions start to feel some confidence in their ability to predict what's coming next. I think whenever you're a company and you're thinking about growth, you're thinking about planning, you need to know what's next and how confident am I in that assessment. And now I think people are becoming much more comfortable with their ability to predict the future, so to speak.
And looking at last week, those numbers were 50,000 claims below the Dow Jones projected estimate. What is driving the sort of accelerated recovery versus, sort of what economists are predicting?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors here. I think that sometimes you're seeing that, let's say like when the American Recovery Act is passed, you see a lot of optimism where sometimes perhaps the optimism gets ahead of the actual financial results. That, we're not necessarily seeing a pickup in employment as a result of that act. But you still see, again, a sense of optimism, more hiring, and then sometimes you're seeing a little bit of pullback. And I would expect, honestly, for the next few months that we're going to see numbers move not necessarily in a linear direction, but a little bit up, a little bit down. Mm-hmm. And I think, even though clearly the vaccination process is well underway, I know you just mentioned we've hit this, milestone of 200 million shots administered. There's still uncertainty in, I think, certain areas of the country where we're seeing flare-ups of COVID cases, talks of returns to shutdowns, at least on a temporary basis. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet. And therefore, I think even though you're seeing the optimism reflected in increased hiring, again, it's not as though we've ripped off the Band-Aid and we're completely back to normal.
Right. And to your point, although first-time unemployment claims are trending downward, the Labor Department is reporting an uptick in those continual unemployment claims. As of April 3rd, more than 17.4 million Americans are receiving some form of continual aid from the government, and that is up nearly 500,000 claims from the end of March. So that's sort of the underbelly of the good news part of it, right? That there are still a lot of Americans who have not been able to find a job, who've been looking for quite a while.
Absolutely. And sometimes when you're talking in these large numbers, and we've been doing so for over a year, you have to be really careful because you don't want to get desensitized to how many people and families are affected. As you just pointed out, over 17 million people on unemployment is a number I find it incredibly hard to get my mind around. It's the same when you see these government stimulus programs and all of a sudden, billions don't seem that big. And I don't think anyone wants to fall in that trap. But even if you dig down into that 17 million, I've seen a number of reports that say there are 4 million people that right now don't feel comfortable for the safety of themselves or their family returning to work. And a lot of those people are in jobs that, really put them in front of the customers, whether it's service, hospitality, travel and leisure. areas that want to ramp up hiring as we go into the summer and we go into the travel season. So I think it's going to be interesting over the next few months how the supply and demand really works out, where you have so many people out of the market. And we would be remiss to say, I don't think the childcare issue is off the table yet, right? We have schools opening, but in some cases, it's a hybrid reopening, and children might be back in school for 2 days a week, which is great, but that might not be enough to enable their parent, a primary caretaker, to go back to the workforce yet.
Especially as we're going into summer and there's no school at all. All right,
yes, exactly.
Which is another problem. But Lori Bettinger, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your economic insight.
Thank you for having me.